Hey everybody, welcome to 40K Paint Week. I am doing something I don't normally do. I am going to make painting videos all week. This is something different. It's something often requested by viewers. But basically what I wanted to do is overview how do I do a big project like a 2-player starter set, which the Leviathan box is. Whenever big sort of like releases like this come along, I like to try and do something different, change it up, and challenge myself with a type of video I haven't made before. So this time around, we're doing basically a how-to, the sort of like broad strokes of how do you tackle a big project like this. And I'm going to start off by showing you my project box, and we're going to paint one of the Space Marines from the Space Marine box to match my current Ultramarine army. I'm going to show you the paints I use and how I basically break the back of a big project. So expect to see sort of like, or hear some like tips and tricks on how I will apply the methods you're going to see to paint the Space Marine that we're painting today across the entire army. And then I'm going to feature three types of Space Marines. I'll do the Terminators, I will do the Flamethrower Marines, and I'll do the Vanguard or the Stern Guard Veterans, basically as individual paint videos. So you can see the way that I duplicate sort of like the initial paint scheme and then change it up for the following miniatures to get a project done relatively fast. And what I'm doing at the same time is you're going to watch me paint one. It'll be my test model for the squad. I'm going to apply that then to all those miniatures at the same time. And at the end of this week, you'll see the entire army built and painted. I'm going to do the same for the Tyranids with 2 test models, the Termagants and the Von Ryan's Leapers. So you can see an example of how I would break down a project like this and get it done pretty fast. So hopefully this is useful and you enjoy it. Let's jump in. I'm going to use this same intro all week. And yeah, we'll see what we're painting today. Tactical project like this, the first thing I like to do is have everything to hand. So in addition to assembling all the miniatures, and obviously the miniatures in this box were relatively, they're all push fit single pose miniatures. They're easy to put together, quick and dirty. I get them all primed and base coated at the same time. Now this color scheme we're matching for the Ultramarines is going to be this right here. It's going to be my sort of standard, it's almost like a Horus Heresy style cobalt blue. That I've used since like Indominus, basically the Indominus color scheme, and then I painted all my kill team stuff in the same method. So this I think it's an infiltrator. I did him, or this is an incursor. No, this is an incursor. Infiltrator, I can't, whichever one has the camera on his back. I've used this same methodology, and this is what we're matching. Now, the one thing I'm not going to be doing, because I'm out of them, they don't make them anymore, the Sector Mechanicus bases, they don't have large sizes, and the scenic bases on some of these miniatures kind of precluded me using them anyway. So I'm not going to bother with those. I'm just going to kind of mimic this same idea with Aster Granite debris, and then the same sort of like rust washing that I did in the center there, and some dry brushing. So I will base match them, like generally. I'm not gonna use the plastic bases. I want to use the bases as they came in the box because it would set a better example. So once everything's assembled, cleaned, put together, the only things that are detached right now for a sub-assembly is I did leave the arms off the Dreadnought. I also magnetized all my bases because I can put them on a baking sheet. It keeps everything together. And I used magnets from Magnet Baron. I had left over from my Horus Heresy project. Big thanks to Magnet Baron for that. And I'll link them in the video description below so you can check out their stuff. They're designed for 32mm bases. It means that I can basically come and go on this project as I like and pick something up and paint it and then put it back and not worry about it like it's various levels of completeness. It also works as like a nice drying rack. And once they're all magnetized, I can then go in and get all my base coats down. Now, I sort of subscribe to a biggest to smallest colors way of doing big projects like this. If I'm going to paint everything all at once and not paint individual models like one by one, I want to start off with the color the model's mostly going to be. So for the vast majority of these miniatures, it's going to be that cobalt blue that you see on the I'm going to say incursor. I don't remember which one it is on this guy. And that's cobalt blue from Green Stuff World. So I've used this for the entirety of the army. I'm still actually going through this gloss primer. This is an airbrush primer that I use for it because the trick is this is actually a translucent blue cobalt metallic, and you put it over a gloss black and it gives you this finish. If you want to do something similar with Games Workshop colors, you could do a light or medium metallic. I would actually recommend probably the Granite Steel. Just like thinly washed down, so you have that over top, and then a cobalt blue, maybe Leviathan blue. You'd have to experiment basically with like bits of sprue and stuff like that to try and get the same color. But you could do a contrast paint over a light metallic, and it would give you the same finish. So if you're trying to replicate this with GW colors, obviously you're gonna want to experiment, try and get it, because they don't do a specific type of paint like this, and obviously you need to have an airbrush. Then for the, what's it called? The Apothecary Biologus, his armor is primarily white, obviously, because he's an apothecary, so I primed him with White Scar. And then I primed with just regular old black, cast black, the Librarian, and I airbrushed him Cantor Blue. So just some Cantor Blue over top of that black to give him a nice firm base coat, and I'll go and pick everything else out afterwards. He's the only one that's going to be in like that matte metallic, or matte blue, because that's what makes him look like a Librarian. That's what stands him out from the Librarius. And this is it. This is the entire project, all ready to basically like break into pieces. And what I'll do is I'm going to share my test model paint schemes for each of these. I'll do the characters and stuff separately. They're not the bulk of the project, right? Obviously, it's the Infernus Marines. I finally remembered their name. The Stern Guard veterans in Primaris size-ness, and the Terminators that are the key like bulk of this box, right? So that's fully 20 of the 25 Space Marine miniatures in here. This whole series is about breaking the back of that project. So I'm going to do my like test model for each squad, and then hammer out the same like the rest of the squad all at once, so you can see it from start to finish, and you can hopefully replicate the same principles, right? It's not about painting the exact colors I'm painting right now. It's about how to get a project going, get it done in like a speedy amount of time. So what normally I would do is I would do like my color theory. I do one of these Infernus Marines, which I'm going to do today, which would get down like the process I'm going to use. Obviously, I've been doing this process for a while, so I kind of already have it in my head, but I'm going to share that with you today so that you can do sort of the same mental gymnastics. Like if you're painting a miniature, go from the big colors to the small colors, do the messiest stuff first, the sort of like finest details last, and you guys can follow along and watch me do that. With that big mess done, I also have my matte. I use Rust-Oleum matte clear, dries to a smooth finish, chalked protective top coat. The reason I use this is, see that company right there, Rust-Oleum? They also made Tester's Dull Coat, and as far as I can tell, this is the exact same stuff. It's cheaper than Dull Coat was, comes in a much bigger can, and every time there's a shelf of it at my local like DIY store, which is called Canadian Tire, I just go and buy it all. I'll have a good supply of this, because they discontinued Tester's Dull Coat. It was kind of a staple in hobby stuff for years and years. And yeah, I'm well into that, so I went and grabbed a bunch of cans of it, and I'll use that to dull coat all. That's what is on this guy, actually. You can see it keeps that sheen of the metallic, but it blends all the colors nicely together when you're done. If I can get that to focus. Can you focus? Focus. There you go. With all the models assembled and primed and then base coated, right, with a color, from there we go to assembling a project box. And this is actually really important to me because I paint so many different projects. When I do a big one like this, I have like my home stash of paints that are all just kind of like randomly in like totes that I paint in front of the TV with. When I do a project box, I try and take every opportunity to paint another color on a big project like this when I've got a timeline to get it done. So what I'll do is I'll put aside all the colors I think I'm going to use for that project into a single bin. And what that means is I'm not hunting through my paints over and over again to try and find them. My old ass Games for Chef Shield palette. And same with brushes and a water cup. I'll even put little handles in here as well to hold on to stuff. And this way, often what I'll do too is I'll check all my paints I might need for the project, and I'll go buy new ones if I think that they're dried out or that I won't have enough to actually finish the project up. So things like I wanted some Ard coat, so I grabbed some Ard coat because I went through and I was like, oh, this Citadel gloss varnish is very close to being empty. Same with like metallics. Like I wanted a fresh Stormhost Silver because I use that to do all the edge paneling on the metallics. I wanted a bunch of like strong golds and bronzes. I wanted my blues. I wanted my skin tones to be fresh. So I went and I grabbed like a bunch of like fresh paints as well. And by putting this all in one box, you can just literally store, like I do is I store this in a bin all together. So this goes on top of this. I'll put my decals in there too because I got my decal sheet from the starter set. And everything is just in one spot. I can pull it out whenever I want to do some painting. If I'm traveling, if I'm up at the cottage, I can take it with me. And the project's kind of ready to go at any given time. You don't need a dedicated paint station to break a big project like this up if you have it kind of like ready to go on the go. And if you don't, then you don't have to try and search for paints and put them back and put them away. I know some people have like big setup paint stations. I tend to like to paint when I have a chance to paint. So if it's just ready to like pull it, even like a little water cup in here, I can find those minutes to paint when I'm doing something else. I can pull it at the kitchen table. I can do it on the couch in front of the TV, and I just have like a moment to paint. I will paint. And so that moment is now here. We're going to start painting this Infernus Marine. You can see he's just primed up. And the first thing I always do is I like to get my basing gels down. I'm using Aster Granite here, the technical one. It's the not lumpy one. The debris version is a bit lumpier, but I figured if I was just doing sort of like mock industrial style bases, then having just kind of like a gravel bottom would be easy enough. I'm using the little spade here. It's a little plastic spade that I've been using for years when the first technical paints came out to get this all spread around, and this should be drying while I'm doing the rest of my painting. So the reason I like to get this down first is it takes a while to dry. A lot of people base last. I just like to get this stuff down immediately so that I save on drying time. So much of getting projects finished is using your time efficiently. And so now we're going to get our base tones down. I always start with my metallics and my dark colors, and then I do washes and highlights. I'm trying to get this done without too much blending so that if people want to follow along using their own Space Marines, they'll be able to just like match colors or see sort of like the general transitioning colors. I'm using Retributor Gold, Thondia Brown, it looks like Lead Belcher, and Corvus Black. Iron Warriors, sorry, and Corvus Black. And these will cover, and Mechanica Standard Gray. And these will cover various parts of the model. Obviously the gold is for the shoulder pad trim. I'm going to start though with my Iron Warriors. You can see it came a little lumpy, so I had to thin it down there. And I'm going to base coat all the metallic pieces, so the hilt of the gun, the like various sort of like piping coming out of his backpack, his little like energy thing, his little sides of his boots here are going to get base coated with that. And this is like one of the darkest lower colors. So the lowest colors in the model I tend to paint first because then you're painting the more raised areas. So now I'm going to go in with the... whatever the bronze is. I can't remember the name of the bronze. I showed it on camera though, so you guys will be able to follow along. I think it's Warblock Bronze on the end of the guns, and then that Retributor Gold on the trim and the chest eagle for that standard sort of Ultramarines. Metallic instead of like bright yellow painting. Not doing the second edition style, mine are a little bit more menacing. The Corvus Black is going to be on the weapon casings. So just thinning that out there, and then this will be like on the grips, sort of like the exterior plating of the gun. So you can see I really have gone from lowest to highest points, right? I've started at the bottom with the metallics. This is the Mechanica Standard Gray, actually. And it's going on the backs of the legs and all the various sort of like tubing. I'd say like the hinging of the armor, right? Where it looks like it's made more from like a very like durable rubber. And there are definitely darker tones I could have picked for all of these base coats, but because I'm going to wash them, I want them to be slightly closer to the final highlight than they would normally be, right? Iron Warriors isn't quite as deep and dark as Lead Belcher is. The Retributor Gold isn't quite as dark as, let's say, like Griffin Gold or like a Warblock Bronze. It isn't as dark as, I think, Brass Scorpion. And so when I place the washes over top of them, then they'll actually have some sort of like recessed darkness. The washes will show better with a lighter color underneath. And so now we're onto that Corvus Black for the weapon casing. And with those like hinging bits, all the metallics finished, this will sort of like be like the outer casing of the Infernus Heavy Flamer. There's not like... I like the black weapon casings. They're easy to work with. And Corvus Black is such a great sort of like forgiving color. It's a very, very, very like dark gray. But if you throw a bit of Null oil over top of it, you almost get like a perfect like transition between pure black and that dark gray at the edges. It's really subtle, but it's great for weapon casings, and it just gives a really nice sort of like matte black military finish to everything. It's just that Thondia Brown, throwing down some brown over top of the pouches, and any straps. A few of these guys have like weapon straps and stuff over their shoulders. Thondia Brown, again, it's a bit lighter than like old GW Scorch Brown. It's a very like worn leather sort of color. And if I put the Agrexo shade or Null Oil over top of it, it's just kind of richen and deepen it. It doesn't require a ton of highlighting. And you can highlight it. The great thing about it is it's a very strong saturated paint. So you can mix almost anything you want into it to highlight it. I think in this one I'll put in a little bit of the Flayed One Flesh. It's just a very, very like mild beige, and that'll bring it up so that when I do the highlights later on, it'll pop. I chose Hobgrot Flesh for my base for the bits of parchment, right? There's some purity seals, oaths of the moment on them. And I chose, I think it's like Caribert Crimson or Sigvald Crimson for all the reds. So all of the purity seals themselves are based in this like rich, deep burgundy, as well as the eyes, like the lenses for the eyes, which get highlighted to like an orange later on to make them pop and contrast against the dark blue cobalt armor. The Hobgot Fresh, it had that like, I don't know, like that sort of like old yellowed parchment look. So don't be afraid, like even if things say they're flesh tones on them, look at the actual color. Like I ignore the names for the most part, and just look at the actual tone. Another thing I'll tend to do, I haven't done it yet because a lot of these are fresh paints, is I'll take a dot of the paint and put it on the cap. So when it's sitting in the actual like project box, I can see the color as it looks when it's dried, and it helps me kind of identify. This is also a base paint, which means it's got a nice like strong amount of pigment on it, so it'll just go right over top of these like cobalt blue sort of like power armor spray airbrush that's on the model right now. And that's the base coat. It's pretty much done. All of the underlying colors are on here, and now I get to actually start throwing down washes if I want. But before I could put the washes down, I wanted to make sure that that first Infernus Marine was completely dry. So I spent some time and I put down a few base coats and the basing medium on 4 more. Once I was sure they were dry, I grabbed my Agrex Earthshade and my Nelm Oil, and I washed the various metallic parts. So in this case, black for all of the, like Nelm Oil black for all of the silver and gray bits, and then all the gold and bronze got a little bit of Agrex Earthshade. A bit more drying time passed, and it was the base gels I was waiting to have dried in the meantime, and that meant I got pretty much all of the base coats and washes done on 4 more Marines. Now I'm mixing a bit of that, Goldfag brown with some water, and the goal here is to kind of mimic that rust marking I had on my other Marines. So I'm going to push down a little bit of like super thin down paint into the middle, and then cleaning my paintbrush, I'll use just a wet paintbrush and kind of tease it towards the edges. And what you'll get is you'll get a greater concentration. I'm so sorry, this is like mostly off screen, but you'll see what I mean in a second. You'll see this sort of like get teased out. There you go. So you can see it kind of bleed towards the edges, and the concentration stays in the middle. And when it's all said and done, it's dry. You get that nice sort of like rusty shadow. Again, spending a bit more time on the other 4 Marines, I waited for that center bit to dry, and then started my dry brushing. And again, before I do highlights and stuff, I like to get all the messy stuff out of the way. So washes and dry brushing. And that means while I'm highlighting and adding higher tones, I can go and clean everything up. So in this case, Blue Horror, I'm going to use a nice wide-ended brush from AK that I like to do like fine dry brushing with. Get a bit of that Blue Horror on it, and then mostly dry it off on the palette. You can see it starts to get streaky. And what I'll do is I'll actually just test it on the very edge of the base. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do concentric circles out from the middle here, leaving as much of that rust as possible in the middle and having a brighter highlight at the edge. And what this mimics is the idea that the sun is overhead and there's a shadow being cast straight down underneath the miniature. It's just a cool effect. It's really easy and simple to do. And by using these like basing gels that are a certain color and then just tinting them with various paints, I've used purples and beiges and all kinds of stuff just to like take the tone up and down. You can get unique bases out of the same basing gel over and over again. If you look at my Custodes, I use like a turquoise in the middle. I've used all kinds of different colors, and the general effect is that you can kind of theme these bases however you want. And then I'm going to grab a bit of that white scar, and actually, sorry, it's not white scar, it's the Corax white base, I think. And then just go over the edge again, just right to the very edge with just like a shocking, not even shocking, but just slightly brighter bit of dry brush. And I'll just clean up the rims, obviously, when I paint them when it's done, but just makes the bases pop. Gives this guy a little bit of contrast on his base and helps him to stand off it. And I'll be honest, I've said this a million times, consistently based, nicely based miniatures make even the most average paint job, which this decidedly is an average paint job, pop and stand on the table. And it cohesively ties an army together. So don't, like, I get it out of the way early, but don't ignore it. And so we're finally onto some highlights. Everything's dry. I've gotten all the messy stuff out of the way. The wash is all fully dry. And I'm going to start with some Canoptic Alloy. I like this one as a bronze highlight, and so it's just going to be used to kind of pick out the edges of the flamer. With that brown wash drying the flamer now, it's going to like just give it some shocking stuff. I'm going to use this old burnished gold that I found that was like almost brand new, and that Stormhost silver for the dings and edges of all the armor plating. So in this one, I'm going to start. I actually like to do the armor edges last because if I make any mistakes, I can cover them up. I'm going to start with that Canoptic Alloy, and you can see I'm just picking out the under edges of the flamer. And what that does, that just gives like a point of reflection as if the light is still above it and makes that flamer pop. Super easy. Pick up the skulls. And it's done. Burnished gold, same thing. High areas on the edges because I've still got a nice transition already from the wash and just that gold. I'm just picking at the high leading edges with this lighter gold just to make them pop a little bit more. So tops of the shoulders, see? That sort of front leading edge. And that's done. And now the longer part is going to be that Stormhost silver. So I'm going to pick out all the edges of the burnished or the lead belcher first. Then we've got the edges of the backpack. And then I'm going to start doing armor edges. And what I want to do is just all of the hard edges in this power armor. I'm just going to give a little blaze of this Stormhost silver. And what it does, because his metallic power armor is like lacquered, it's going to make him look like he's been walking around and kind of banging into things. And it replaces like a traditional color highlight. So instead of doing a blend or anything like that, this is a quick and dirty. You wash down the recesses with that Null oil. And then you just make the rest of it pop with these bright silver highlights. Now, honestly, this might be the most time-intensive part of painting the whole miniature. You can take your time, make these thin. Don't like overdo it. Don't add too many splashes. And my thing is I always notice another place I want to put them. So even later on when I'm painting like the eye lenses and stuff like that, I'll go back and maybe add like a touch more silver or bang up an edge a little bit. I'll ring the eyes after I've finished highlighting them, just to make it pop out. But just like with the other metallics, you're going for the high points here, the leading edges, and the things that are sort of like above to create a sense of like glow basically on the model, and just give it a little extra pop. So it's on to eyes and the purity seals. You can see here I'm using that Mephiston red, blazing orange, and then a little dot of that Corax white again, blending maybe a little bit here using the oranges, and I'm going to throw in a little bit of old golden yellow as well at the end. Now when I paint my eyes and my like purity seals, I tend to want to put those highlights again up high, so on the tops of them, and you'll see that when I do my eyes, I spin the model around so that I can do a straight line. Paintbrushes always want to make a straight line. So if you can always be pulling a certain direction, not trying to poke with it, you'll get a finer thing. It's just an old eye painting trick. Less poking with paintbrushes, more creating a stroke. Get those reds and oranges in there. I'm going to put a little dot of white at the back of the eye. A point of reflection for the lens, with that Corax white. And you'll see I'm doing the same thing. I'm holding it sideways so that my paintbrush goes in at the angle you would draw a line at. And that'll just give it that little like gemming effect on the eye by putting that little dot in the back corner. On either side, you see I just spin them around, so I can do the same thing on this side. Try not to dot, but just do a stroke. You can see me pulling down there a little bit. And the eyes are complete. So then it's parchment time. You can see I've got these two beiges now, the flayed one flesh, to blend in a little bit here with that Hobgrot. I'm going to do like a 50-50 in the beginning. See me mixing it there. And this first highlight, again, you'll notice I'm doing left to right. I'm leaving some of that wash and that darker sort of like stained down tone in there to give me some shadows, and just picking up the leading edges up high. Same over here on the purity seal on his foot. And what that's going to do too, by leaving those little lines, you almost mimic writing on it. You give the illusion that there might be like some kind of like old faded crumpled penmanship on there. The second seal in behind. And then I'll just add more of that flayed one flesh for a top highlight and just pick out the same spots, but the corners, right? So just a little bit less in that same raised area, and it gives me a nice parchment. I'm really happy with that. I'd never used these two colors before, and I like to like, every once in a while I'm standing at the paint rack and I look at a paint and I'm like, that's a neat color. That'd be cool for this. And I grab it, and these really worked out. It was a real easy like 1, 2, 3 for the parchments. And of course, they're Space Marines, so there are tons of these on all these models. So having a quick and easy like 2-color method with a wash for doing them will save you a ton of time. All right, it's time to do some highlights on that bolt pistol case and all those pouches. Bit of Thondia Brown, bit of Wraithbone. Again, Thondia Brown's great. It lightens up with almost any beige. So I'll do like a little 50-50 mix again, and then just bang out the edges, basically, of these. It's real fast, but it just means that the wash isn't the only thing creating a highlight here. I can have the leading edges sort of like picked out as well. And so again, just sort of like top edges, where there would be more light, and then down. And that'll create just a little more richness to the leather, make it a little more beat up and battle worn. I like the kind of like serious color tones on these guys, and so I didn't want to go too high with it, but just a quick highlight kind of neatens everything up. Once that was done, I'd done all my major colors, so it was time to like do a final pass and be sort of like, oh, did I miss anything? Oh, I didn't highlight the metallics. Here's a little bit more Mechanica Standard Gray, just to bang sort of like some highlights on the edges of the gray. I could have left it as is, but it's nice just to give it a little bit of attention, give a little more richness. I think I noticed that I didn't highlight part of his like eyes and his head, so I go in with a little more Stormhouse Silver too afterwards. I do the backs of his legs, just a light sort of like overbrush of that webbing or that tubing sort of like at the backs of his legs and stuff as well. So it's decal time. A little ard coat, a little hot water, 3 little decals, the Devastator symbol, the Ultramarine symbol. What's funny is I immediately noticed, so I like to use, I honestly don't trust decal solvents on these sheets when they're using any kind of like two-tone airbrush like this. I find they can also dissolve the paint, so I'm using just ard coat to adhere to them. It's just way safer. Using solvents when you're doing decals can sometimes be a pain. So the Ultramarine U on the knee and the shoulder, just take them off the water slide transfer with a bit of water, a bit of gloss varnish, and then the trick is do not touch them once you get them in place. You may want to soak up, and I noticed I didn't do the metallics around his face. So after that was done, I was being very careful not to touch them. The handles are handy for this because it means that, see, handles are handy. It means you don't have to do it. And then he's off the base. I'm going to very carefully hold him by the backpack and do his victory lap, which is the base rim. We've succeeded in the victory lap, and we have a finished Infernus Marine. I'm pretty happy with this guy. I think that he turned out great for a quick and dirty paint job. Very little mixing, and I'll get him on the table fast. So tune in tomorrow. We'll check out the Terminators and work towards more models in this combat patrol.
Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that video. There are tons of other games already recorded for you to watch. Click over to my channel page if you haven't already, and have a look through the dozens of playlists full of videos. I guarantee you'll discover a game you haven't seen played before. I put out new videos 7 days a week, and every day is themed to a different genre as I continue to explore the wider world of gaming. Of course, none of that's possible without you, the viewer, so click a like and subscribe if you'd like to stay on top of what's happening here daily. My 2 kids and I are massively grateful to be able to have the flexibility of this job so I can always maximize my time with them. If you want to support me continuing to put out this content, it's only possible because of my amazing backers on Patreon who support the studio, equipment, and model cost, as well as being how I make the bulk of my living. You can also help out by buying a t-shirt through Spreadshirt, a measuring gauge or widget from Death Ray Designs, or buying one of my games and supplements like Last Days, Gamma Wolves, and Blaster. As a way of showing my appreciation, patrons get early access to new games and supplements that I write throughout the course of the year. Huge thanks for watching, it really does help out, and happy gaming.